Welcome to This Week in South Carolina. I'm Gavin Jackson. With a little over a week to go before Election Day, we recap the gubernatorial debate between incumbent Republican Governor Henry McMaster and former 1st District Congressman Joe Cunningham, a Democrat. A look at where both candidates stand on abortion, education, and the economy. But first, with early voting now open, Chris Whitmire with the South Carolina Election Commission updates us on what voters can expect leading up to Election Day. Chris, thanks for joining us. And so,
you're welcome.
Chris, talk about early voting. It got underway on Monday. We're taping this on Thursday morning. Tell us what you're seeing right now in this early data for early voting in the state.
Sure. More than 42,000 people voted early on Monday, the first day of early voting. That was about twice as many as the highest day from the June primaries, which is the only thing that we have to compare it to. Early voting's new, it's been in place since the bill passed on May 13th, and so the June primaries are really our only experience with true early voting. But that was very encouraging. We assumed there would be more people voting early in the general election for various reasons, but double the highest number from the June primaries, I think, was very impressive. And then another more than 45,000 on Tuesday, so the number went up. The numbers for Wednesday are still being put together. But we expect those numbers to look similar to Tuesday. Not sure if it'll go up again or be about the same, but so we're hovering in the mid 40,000s a day.
So is that kind of what you guys were expecting? Did you have any expectations and anticipations? What do you deduce from these numbers?
Yeah, so we expected the numbers would go up for a number of reasons. One is that it was such a short time frame between May 13th, the date the bill was signed into law, and the beginning of early voting. It was about 2 weeks, so not a lot of time to really get the word out there to everybody about early voting. Also, not a lot of time for counties to identify and open a maximum number of locations, or as many locations as they would want it to open. We had about 85 locations statewide in June. We now have about 115 locations statewide in June. So more locations. There's also more hours. So the hours are 8:30 to 6 for a general when it's only 8:30 to 5 for a primary. So you get that additional hour. Saturday, as we go through early voting, there'll be an extra day. Saturday is included for general elections, which was not the case in the primaries. And so just as people learn about it, as we advertise it, as people talk to their family and friends about their experience with early voting, we think the convenience of it for voters, being able to choose to vote at any time over a 17-day period, except for a few days there where it's not open, gives voters more options, and we expect voters to start taking advantage of that. Another reason is that in the 2020 general election, we essentially had early voting. It was basically no excuse absentee, a little different process. But in that case, when you added in-person absentee and absentee by mail, more than 50%, about 53% of the voters in the 2020 general voted before Election Day. So we had that experience to say, look, that's probably where we're going. And then we also look at other states and other jurisdictions that have similar early voting processes, and they see approximately half the voters voting before Election Day. So we expected those numbers to go up.
So a lot to look for when you get that data at the end of this early voting period for this year that you guys will be able to, I guess, hash out, see what the trends are, of course, and who's voting where. But Chris, you guys had some problems this week too on Monday. The sevotes.gov website crashed. Was that malicious? Was that just overwhelmed? Can you give us some background about what happened there on Monday with the sevotes.gov?
Sure. We've worked with our law enforcement, cybersecurity partners and professionals and determined that it was not malicious. We recently redesigned our website, and it's great. We also moved the server, and in doing all of that, the proper settings and optimizations for the amount of traffic that we received on Monday morning were not in place, causing the website to crash on Monday, and ended up getting it back up by Monday afternoon. But nothing malicious, but certainly a learning experience for us and everyone involved, so that we believe now that the proper settings and optimizations are in place, that that won't be an issue going forward.
Yeah, it's a lot of interesting and informative tidbits on that website, resources as well, sample ballots, voting locations, results, all that fun stuff, scvotes.gov. But Chris, I want to ask you about the bipartisan, that massive voter integrity bill that we saw the legislature pass this year. You've been talking about it, was signed by the governor. Tell us more about what was changed in that law. Again, massive bipartisan support for that law.
Yes, there's a lot in it. Of course, the big ticket item is early voting, and which has been something the State Election Commission has supported for a long time to give voters more options before Election Day. Aside from that, there's some changes to the absentee voting process. One of the big changes is that the deadline to apply for an absentee ballot is now 11 days before the election instead of 4 days. So 5 o'clock on Friday of this week, is the deadline to return your application, the deadline to apply. And so that's 7 days earlier. That's a change. I probably just need to say it that also implementing early voting also eliminates in-person absentee. So there's no more such a thing as in-person absentee where you go to the office, get your absentee ballot and vote it there. It's all by mail. It implemented some new rules for returning your absentee ballot. When you return your absentee ballot, you have to show a photo ID, just like you would if you were voting in person. And there are new rules around who can return an absentee ballot for you. It's either a family member or what's called an authorized representative who's really acting on behalf of someone with disabilities who's unable to go to the polls. So those are the only two types of people that can return your ballot, whereas before you could really have anybody return your ballot for you as long as you fill out this form and both people sign the form. Now that's limited to just a family member or just an authorized representative who's doing it for a person with disabilities. And they would also have to show a photo ID. Some changes on the witness requirement. Two changes there really. One is that the witness has to be a person who's at least 18 years of age or older. Before there was no rule on that, so a minor could sign. There's just no rule there. And then the witness must also print their name. In addition to signing. So the witness always had to sign, provide their address, but I think that was put in place because if it's my signature, you're not going to be able to read it. So having the witness print their name was added. There's also a limit mentioned, family members and authorized representatives returning ballots. Family members and authorized representatives can also request a voter's absentee application for them and return it. But there's been a limit put in place of 5 in addition to your own that you can request applications and return ballots. So if I was returning family members' ballots, I could only do 5 in addition to my own and couldn't do any more. So that's another change. Quite a few things in there. I think those are the big items, but I always could be leaving something out there.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think they also increased penalties and made it a felony offense for voter fraud too, which is pretty rare too, right? I mean, do we even have, do you know any big cases or any cases of voter fraud that we've seen in the state in the past couple years?
They have been few and far between. I believe there are some cases. We went through House Legislative Oversight Committee hearing earlier this year, going back to last year, but I know as part of that hearing, other state agencies, I'm not sure if it was law enforcement or courts or HLOC themselves, but they put together a list of incidents from, I don't know, the past 10, 20 years. There were some incidents on there, but to answer your question, they were rare, few and far between of incidents of prosecuted election crimes.
And when we talk about incidents too, Chris, kind of jumping ahead a little bit, are there typical issues that we see on Election Day? Are there any threats we've seen to poll workers or any safety concerns that you all are worried about in this day and age?
Yeah, so in the primaries, we had some incidents where I will describe them as election integrity activists showed up at polling places demanding access to equipment arguing with the clerks and managers there at the polling place, demanding to take pictures of the equipment, of making claims that seals, supposed required seals, were missing on the equipment, and in some cases called police to polling places to file a police report about these alleged improprieties. So that in and of itself was essentially interfering with the conduct of an election and disruptive at the polls. It can be intimidating to the voters who are there. These are while voting is going on. So what we've done is we've worked with SLED, our executive director, Howard Knapp, and SLED chief Mark Keel actually issued a joint letter to all the sheriffs and police chiefs around the state, making them aware of a number of things. One is the general environment since the 2020 general election, and that and sort of the threats nationally against election officials. Now, we haven't received any death threats like they have in other states, but the environment is certainly there. And then two, making them aware of these incidents from the June primary and that these violate state law and that we have to have order in polling places. Also that law enforcement officials are not allowed to go into the polling place unless they're there to vote or unless they're called by the managers for assistance. And that's designed to prevent voter intimidation, because there's history in South Carolina, in this country, of law enforcement being used to intimidate voters. So that's why those laws are in place. So just making them aware of that it's not a thing where an activist can call the police into the polling place. Only poll managers can do that. And then making them aware, hey, but we want you to be at least close by and know where all these polling places are, because if the county boards of voter registration elections need your assistance, we certainly want you to be ready to respond and come to our aid if necessary. Yeah. But with all that said, we expect a peaceful, good election day on November 8th, and that's the way it's been so far in early voting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even with the new voting machines that we've had in place since, I guess, 2020 was the first general election with those new, paper ballots, touchscreen, all that stuff, it's been very smooth sailing too. And we have about a minute left, Chris. I want to just ask you and tell you that both gubernatorial candidates this week during the debate said that they do trust the certified election results from November 8th, and that they would accept them. Is there any reason people shouldn't accept the election results from the State Election Commission, from their county board of elections in this day and age?
No, and I'm glad they said that. The State Election Commission, your county boards of voter registration elections, and all the poll managers throughout the state work very hard to ensure election integrity in South Carolina. We put out a document, we have it on our website, called Election Integrity in South Carolina. It really goes through everything that we do to ensure election integrity. I'll just mention one of the big things is we do hand count audits after the election. And so some of the claims is that, hey, the votes can be changed over the internet, or somehow somebody can hack the scanners or the voting equipment and change votes. That's just not possible. Number one, the voting system is not connected to the internet in any way. It is impossible. And number two, we do a hand count audit after the election. So when you look at your ballot and you put it in that ballot box, we then go back and do a sampling of ballot boxes, open that box, hand count them to make sure that it matches what came out of that scanner. So that's just one of the things we do, but one of the most important things we do.
Gotcha. A lot of good information there, and more that you can find on scvotes.gov. And that's Chris Whitmire. He's the Director of Public Information at the South Carolina State Election Commission. Chris, thanks so much.
You're very welcome.
This past week, SCETV, South Carolina Public Radio, and the Post and Courier hosted the only gubernatorial debate between incumbent Republican Henry McMaster and Democrat Joe Cunningham. The debate took place here in our Columbia studios. Here's a recap from some of the key moments from the debate, starting with their response to what they think abortion law should look like in South Carolina.
Quite simply, I think it was fine the way before under Roe v. Wade. And quite pointedly, I trust women. I trust women to make their own health care decisions. And Governor McMaster doesn't. And that's the clear contrast between the two people you have on stage here tonight. Because Governor McMaster wants to ban all abortions and have no exceptions for rape or for incest or even for the life of the mother. Folks, his position is the most egregious form of government overreach you could imagine. I mean, just think about it. If the government, if politicians are able to come into your doctor's offices, what could they not do? That's why the consequences of this election are so dire, because if an abortion ban comes to the governor's desk without exceptions, he'll sign it, and I'll veto it. And that is the key difference between the options that you have here in South Carolina tonight.
Governor, your response?
Well, the problem with that is Mr. Cunningham knows no such bill is going to ever reach my desk. We've never had a bill like that in South Carolina. What Mr. Cunningham, as far as pre-Roe, and as we know, that allowed abortions up to 24 weeks. That is 6 months. That is 6 months that Roe allowed abortions for any reason or no reason at all. That is the radical position. We know when that heart starts beating at 6 to 8 weeks. We know that pain is felt from sometime 15 to 19, but none of the bills that are pending right now do what he said. I'm confident that what is going to happen is that our legislators will continue to work as they have been doing, and they will come up with a bill, if they come up with one at all. If not, we have the pain capable and the heartbeat bill, both of which have all the exceptions. But I believe they will come up with a bill that is acceptable to most of the people of the state. That is the goal of what they're doing.
Economists and business leaders are forecasting a recession in 2023. How would you help South Carolinians weather this storm as they are already feeling the pain from inflation and higher prices?
I would continue to do what we have been doing, and that is by building. But let me just say, most of what Joe Cunningham just said is dead wrong, and he knows better, and he's trying to scare people, and I think it's a bad service to the people to continue with that line of irresponsible charges and accusations. What he said is not correct. Now, what we will do is what we have been doing. We have had, even since Mr. Biden took office, now he has been an obstacle, and we've had to fight him tooth and nail. We've had, I think, 5 or 6 lawsuits trying to keep them from disrupting business in South Carolina. But this year right now, we have a record of capital investment for our people. It is over $5 billion. We have never done that before. What else have we done? We've cut taxes. Do you know that the income tax rates in South Carolina have never been cut before? We cut them this time from 7%, and it's going to go down to 6%. We've got more people working right now than we've ever had before. We have more money in our trust funds. They're filled up than we've ever had before. We've also, for the last 4 years, cut taxes for the unemployment insurance. I have the endorsement of the National Federation of Independent Businesses. They're small businesses. I also have the endorsement of about 70%, 75% or so of all of our sheriffs and solicitors for law enforcement. My goal is to keep this state safe so the people can work. The most important thing we do is education, and we'll get to that in a minute.
Thank you, Governor. Congressman?
Yeah, I just want to clarify that Governor McMaster had an opportunity to say that he would veto a bill without exceptions. Folks, when Governor McMaster said he wanted to do away with exceptions, believe him when he said it the first time. But when it comes to our economy, last year, when gas prices were skyrocketing, I felt them at the pumps as well. I felt them at the grocery store. But we called on Governor McMaster to temporarily suspend the gas tax here in South Carolina, just like other states were doing. This wasn't a partisan solution. Republican governor down in Georgia did the same thing, temporarily suspended it. But Governor McMaster would not suspend the gas tax. That would have provided immediate relief for folks at home, and also would not have jeopardized any types of building projects because we had so much money come in through the bipartisan infrastructure deal or COVID relief. The fact is, folks, we want to eliminate the state income tax because South Carolina has the highest state income tax rate in the entire Southeast. And with all due respect to Governor McMaster, he's had over 40 years in politics to eliminate it. You look around at states like Tennessee and Florida and Texas, they're seeing unprecedented economic growth. Folks, we can be that economic lighthouse for businesses that will either want to grow or expand into South Carolina. But we have to have new ideas and we have to have a new vision.
Governor McMaster, we have an ongoing teacher shortage here in South Carolina. So what would you do to recruit and retain teachers, especially in higher poverty and more rural areas of the state?
Well, that's a good question, and it's hard to get them into those rural areas. That's something we've been working on for a long time, and sometimes we can get the teachers to go there, but they don't stay because there's nothing to do. It's a rural area, and they'd rather be somewhere around a city. But I think we got to have the best teachers in the whole country in South Carolina. I don't want to pay them just to meet the southeastern average. I'd like to be way above that. In the time that I've been in office, we have raised teacher pay $10,000. That's not enough. We need to do more. But we're doing everything we can for teachers. In addition, and back to York County, that's one of the fastest growing places that they need more schools. They have more schools coming up than most anything. But we have to meet that demand. I have a task force that's working right now. It's retention and recruitment and retention is headed by a number of people who are, Barbara Nielsen is one, and their job is to determine exactly what else we can do. But we've raised the pay. We have law enforcement officers in the schools. I got law enforcement officers, a trained, certified, armed law enforcement officer in now over 900, going on 1,000 schools in South Carolina out of about 1,200 or so. We had less than 400, somewhere around 300 when I started. We also have a mental health counselor, and we're working to find a way with Prisma and McLeod Health and Health and Human Services to have an emergency room for mental health. We're trying to start it in Florence or Marion County. We got a lot we can do to help the teachers.
Yeah, look, this is one of the most pressing issues in our entire state. And a special session was called, which is normally reserved for emergencies, whether it be hurricane relief or otherwise, or the most pressing issues. But it wasn't called for paying our teachers more, or fixing our roads, or doing something about our high crime rate. It's called to rip away the freedoms of women. And folks, this teacher shortage crisis that is going on is being felt by everyone. And some of us feel it more than others. I know that when I drop my 4.5-year-old son off at school and the door swings open and I see a brand new teacher, my heart kind of sinks a bit because I think about the bonds that my son has formed with that teacher that has left. And I think about him having to start over from scratch. Folks, our teachers deserve a lot more than what they're getting. And I want a 10% raise for all teachers across the board. And I want to get the starting salary up to $50,000 a year by the end of my administration. And teachers are feeling betrayed by Governor McMaster and by politicians in Columbia. They're leaving in droves because of it. The same reason that most people leave their jobs, because they're disrespected, they're underpaid, and they're overworked.
There are concerns that just like with the abortion ruling that the Supreme Court issued earlier this year, that the court could also reverse the gay marriage precedent that it passed. South Carolina law currently bans gay marriage as well as the state constitution. If the court reverses the gay marriage ruling that it has in the past and throws it back to the states, would you support legislation that would eliminate the ban on gay marriage and also allow voters to vote on to rescind the amendment in the Constitution?
Well, gay marriage is in our Constitution. It is not allowed, and under our state law, it is not allowed. I would follow state law, whatever the state law is, but maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I think that marriage ought to be between a man and a woman. Just like I think that boys ought to play in boys' sports and girls ought to play in girls' sports. But I mean, you have to have some common sense in this arena, which seems to be changing all the time. But I think that our traditions, I think, are strong, and I think they're there for a reason.
Yeah, wow. For those of you who are just tuning in, it's 2022. And Governor McMaster wants to ban same-sex marriage. You just heard that tonight, folks. We have politicians that have been in government so long and become so calcified in their beliefs. And Governor McMaster has been a politician literally longer than I've been alive. And he's been taking our state backwards the entire time. Governor McMaster has been leading South Carolina into the 1950s since the 1980s. Folks, this campaign that we're running is a campaign ran on freedom. And I don't care who you are or who you love. I don't think it's government's role to be getting in the middle of that. And I don't think it's politicians' role to be ripping away freedoms from people, and women who just want to make their very own health care decisions. As it relates to veterans and taking care of them, we could expand Medicaid and provide health care to tens of thousands of veterans. And the governor could do that just with the flip of his pen. I won't hesitate for a second to expand Medicaid on day one to make sure that health care is expanded. And here's the thing. For those of you who have private insurance as well, your rates will go down because the pool will be expanded.
To stay up to date with the latest news throughout the week, check out the South Carolina Lead. It's a podcast that I host on Tuesdays and Saturdays that you can find on southcarolinapublicradio.org or wherever you find podcasts. For South Carolina ETV, I'm Gavin Jackson. Be well, South Carolina.